Hi again everyone, and I'm back with my Herbalism book review video. My previous video was a review of the Herbal Tarot and its accompanying guidebook, a deck that I'm on first impressions very impressed with, but I was saying in that video that it's important that you approach herbalism responsibly. Now I'm not a professional herbalist, and I've been trained only in the sense of from my own interest. I've studied for a diploma in herbalism and I've attended night classes and I've done a lot of reading around the subject, and I know a fair amount for an amateur, but I wouldn't consider myself a herbal expert, and I certainly wouldn't presume to diagnose anyone else or prescribe herbs to anyone else. But what I would say is I'm very aware that it's not the case that you can simply take herbs willy-nilly and expect that all of them will have benign effects. One of my favourite herbalism teachers actually is the very aptly named Susun Weed, and I'm going to review one of her books actually, I'll show you some more, but I'll link to some of her information below because she does a very good article on using herbs safely and responsibly. So I'll link to that below, and I would recommend that you look into that. And also she's got lots of great videos on YouTube and articles on her website. Lots of really good information, and I'm reminded of a talk of hers that I listened to once, and she was relating a story in this talk of an experience she'd had where she had been at another talk and she'd been speaking about herbalism and also about Western medicine, and many of the people in the audience, of course, because she was a herbalist, expected that she would be all very pro alternative medicine and complementary medicine and herbalism, and would be very kind of down on Western modern medicine and all this terrible man-made stuff. But she actually was saying that you've got to be discerning when it comes to the use of appropriate healing and health building modalities. And what she was pointing out is that there are some things that actually there are lots of herbalism treatments or herbal preparations that you can take before you go on to modern medicine, as it were, that are far gentler and still very effective, and that are worth pursuing before you go straight to the doctor and get a prescription for a medicine. But there are other cases where actually herbalism is not the best approach, that there are times when modern medicine is going to be better. For example, if I walk out the door and get hit by a bus and I'm lying on the ground and my legs are broken, I'm not going to say, please could you get me some tincture of willow bark, because that's a painkiller that has some of the same properties as aspirin. I'm going to say, get me morphine and to a hospital, and I want an ambulance and I want to be anaesthetized and just sort me out. So there are times when modern medicine is more appropriate for our needs. And she had been saying this in her presentation, and she was approached by somebody at the end who said to her, how can you say this? How can you promote modern medicine this way? You're a herbalist. And her response was, yes, I'm a herbalist, but I'm not a stupid herbalist. And I love that. So I take a lot of my herbalism cues from her. And on that note, this is one of her books, possibly her first book or second, and it's called Healing Wise. And basically what this is an exploration of 7 nutritive herbs that can also be used medicinally, but basically are nutritive herbs, and they are burdock, chickweed, dandelion, nettle, oat straw, seaweeds and violet. And she talks about the properties of each of the plants. She goes into all kinds of information. She provides recipes. She talks about what they're used for. She also has a section in each of them where the plant itself speaks to you. So it's written, so here for example here we have the dandelion section, and we have lovely little illustrations, and then this section is called Dandelion Speaks, and it starts off, Bonjour ma chère, is it not a day magnifique, beautiful, I am so full of delight that you have come to play with me, ami. This dandelion is French, and that's partly because dandelion, I think she explains, comes from dent de lion, lion's teeth, because of course little leaves are jagged like lion's teeth, and they all speak a bit like this. They don't all speak in French. So chickweed, for example, here we have chickweed. Chickweed speaks, hi, come play for a while, come play with the fairies and me, come play with the fireflies and me, come play in the star fields with me. I'm a cool chick, chickweed indeed. No, no, not chicory. Call me Stellaria, the little star lady. If you like, then you won't confuse me with that bold thing chicory, so unladylike. So she, each of the herbs is given a voice and recipes and facts and uses. And one of the interesting things in here is that she also speaks about different traditions. So she talks about the 3 traditions of healing. And she talks about the scientific tradition, the heroic tradition, and the wise woman tradition. And basically what she's talking about is the different approaches to healing. So let me just see if I can read a bit. Yeah, so the wise woman tradition focuses on integration and nourishment and insisting on attention to uniqueness and holographic interconnectedness. Alternative healthcare practitioners usually think in the heroic tradition, the way of the saviour, a circular path of rules, punishment and purification, cleansing and so on. Trust me. AMA approved, legal, covered by insurance healthcare practitioners are trained to think in the scientific tradition, which is walking the knife edge of keen intellect, the straight line of analytical thought, measuring and repeating, excellent for fixing broken things, trust my machine. And what she's saying here is not that these different traditions, one is better than the other, but just that they are different and have different approaches at different times. So the scientific, heroic and wise woman traditions are ways of thinking, not ways of acting. Any practice, any technique, any substance can be used by a practitioner in any one of the 3 traditions. There are, for instance, herbalists and midwives and MDs in each tradition. And she gives each one a symbol. To the scientific tradition, the symbol is line, and the monolith because it's very linear. The heroic tradition is a circle because it's about repeating things and this kind of holistic view. And the wise woman tradition is a spiral because that's about moving forward and being in a different place as time goes on. The scientific tradition sees the healer as mechanic. We are broken machines and we need to be fixed with surgery or medicine. The heroic tradition sees the healer as the saviour or the ruler. I'm going to cure you with some kind of magical properties or some amazing substance that I give you. And then the healer in the wise woman tradition is the compassionate, self-loving one. So it's about self-healing and so on. So she goes into all kinds of things in that, and it's a very interesting book. And she talks about nourishment and nutrition and so on. And each of the herbs is given a kitchen area, so you get a recipe for each of the herbs. So it's just a lovely book, a very gentle introduction to herbalism and nutritive herbs. All of these are safe, easy to consume herbs. You don't need to worry about taking too many of them, largely. So that's a book that's well worth getting. And she has other books that she specialises in. So here's one that she has on breath and health. There's one, I think this is her most recent, which is about called Down There, Reproductive Health. A very thick book. And here's one on menopausal years. So she writes mainly for women, but much of the information applies to men as well. She also has one on childbearing. Now, I don't agree with absolutely everything she says, and in her book she does tend to, I've noticed, she references lots of material, and some of the material is can sometimes contradict itself, but by and large I think she is a good herbalism teacher and well worth seeking out, and she has lots of free information available online, so recommended. Now, 2 things to say as a kind of contrast or complement to that. One is she writes mainly for women, but there is a book for men, but she hadn't written, but she had recommended this herbalist, James Green, and this is about herbs for healthcare for men and boys, and it goes into general information about herbalism and then also specific male problems. So you can guess what some of those are. So that's quite a useful book to have if you want something that is focusing more on the men's side of things. And in terms of what I mentioned about her, about Susun Weed sometimes providing information that's slightly contradictory, somebody who is very good at not doing that, I think, is James Duke, who's written this book called The Green Pharmacy, and he actually references quite a lot of scientific studies. He will say, well, let's just show you an example if I can. So in this book, so here is a section on bronchitis. For each herb that he recommends for bronchitis, so there we have mullein, stinging nettle, couch grass or couch grass, he has a little kind of key there, and depending on the number of little leaves that you see against each of the herbs, it tells you how strong an action and how effective an action it has. So some herbs are known to be extremely effective, and some aren't quite so, you know, necessarily quite so much evidence that they work. But everything he mentions has got some relevance, so that's worth looking at. On a similar vein, this is Tyler's Honest Herbal, and this only provides information on herbs that actually have been shown to have, there is several studies that show that these herbs are effective. So it describes what things are good for what ailment and so on. So he goes through lots of different herbs and related remedies, and the whole list of them there. Very good book. It fell into bits, unfortunately. That's the kind of inner bit that's fallen out, which has got some lovely pictures. So that's Tyler's Honest Herbal, recommended. If you really are interested in the nutritional side of herbs, then this is a very good book, Nutritional Herbology, by Mark Peterson, and this actually goes into in depth the nutritive values of different herbs. So there we have peppermint leaf and all the different herbs that are in there, different nutrients that are in there. So it's very interesting. It also talks about the folk history and use, the medicinal properties, and how to prepare the herbs. So quite heavy going in places, but worth having if you're interested. A rather nice, gentle, again, introduction and good overview of herbs is The New Holistic Herbal by David Hoffman. And again, lots and lots of information here about different systems. So what he does is he talks about herbs in relation to specific bodily systems. So here we have, for example, a section on the reproductive system. And he goes into patterns of disease in different systems, and then which herbs are most appropriate for supporting each system. So really interesting, and not limited just to herbalism. It also talks a little bit about flower remedies and so on, but mainly herbalism, and talks about how to prepare them too. So that's recommended. And then probably my very favourite herbalism book, and one of the first ones I had, an absolutely beautiful book, is this Encyclopedia of Medicinal Plants by Andrew Chevalier. And what's so nice about this is it's gorgeously illustrated, just with lovely colour pictures. Goes into how the history of herbs in different areas. So here we have in Europe, and India, and various different parts of the world. And then it talks about how different herbs are prepared, and then there's a section on the key medicinal plants, and some of them are given a whole page and others are given less space. But let's just have a... Okay, so here we have garlic, and you see there's a bit there about the parts of the garlic that are used, key preparations and their uses, habitats and cultivation, related species, key constituents. So it talks to you about what components of the herbs are, have medicinal properties, key actions, the research. So it talks about what things have been researched and what haven't, traditional and current uses, self-help uses, all kinds of great information. So there's tons and tons of information on several key herbs, and then some are given a bit less information, but nonetheless very useful information. And then at the end, again, you have herbs by different problems, so musculoskeletal problems there, respiratory tract problems. So if you've got an ailment, you can look up what is the most appropriate herb. And then also a section on how to prepare herbs in different ways. So creams, ointments, tonic wines, infused oils, infusions, tinctures. There's a section on harvesting herbs and their properties. So really, if you wanted one really good overall book on herbalism to get you started, that told you everything you really needed to know about getting into herbalism and good, safe information, then this is the one I would recommend. And if you want to develop a good intuitive relationship with herbs, particularly nutritive herbs, then I would go for the work of Susun Weed. And I will link below with some information which I hope you'll find useful, and hopefully this has been a useful adjunct to my review of the Herbal Tarot. And if you'd like me to cover any more information about herbalism, and maybe you'd like me to do a demonstration of how to make nourishing herbal infusions, then I would be glad to do it. So let me know in the comments below, and if you're up for it, then I'm up for it. So hope you're all well, and I'll hopefully see you all again very soon. Take care. Bye.